extremely disruptive, but back
What's that?
the crunchy carrot.
Oh, it's fine.
I think you could maybe also kind of put it more in the middle so that it's more direct. I don't know if you just...
It's really okay.
With the cable.
They should just be here, really, is what it is. If they can't hear me, then they...
The whole internet should
Your
just
own
be
fault.
here.
All of the internet in this building.
Oh my goodness. That reminds me of the internet episode in the IT crowd.
Oh yeah.
Where the box. The box, the internet, this is the internet.
Yeah.
And then it falls over and everyone like loses their mind. Anyway. Welcome back, everybody, round two. I've acquired a stabby thing. I will not be using stabby thing except to gesticulate emphatically. That seems appropriate. Intimacy in martial arts practice. That is what we're talking about for folks who have been part of the first section. So we covered basically the kind of pitfalls and problems that you can run into when you're in a martial arts situation, and I shared my own examples of some of the worst of those that made me feel very bad about a lot of things. So I think to wrap it up in the last 20 minutes that we have, something that I find really useful for me is to think about how my training is building me as a person, because I've been able to get to a point with my skills and with my competency and my motor control and everything, where I can think about what it actually is building for me as a fighter and a person. And the greatest thing that I've learned through all of the sketchy, non-structured training that I've done is to be able to adapt to different contexts, to adapt to different training environments, to adapt to different partners and tools and all the things that make me sound like I'm amazing and a Swiss Army Sam that can go into any situation. It's not true at all. It's just the adaptability that's come out of having all those different variations is really something that I value for myself. But it also means that I think a lot about how I can internalize the valuable things. Physically, what that looks like is, I think, a lot about the distance that my body reaches. Now, this doesn't sound like related to it doesn't sound really related to intimacy and partnering, but it actually is very important, because being aware of where I end lengthwise, and I'm not necessarily talking about body shape, I'm talking about just my own sphere, my own bubble. Being aware of what's within that is a really, really good thing for me to be able to keep myself safe. And that's not just here in the training room, it's everywhere. It's being able to understand range and how outside factors come into that space, and being able to control that and put myself in a position where those things have less of an impact on me. And I'm talking metaphorically as well. I'm talking about language, I'm talking about perception, I'm talking about, as a trans person, I'm talking about how the world sees me, which is a definite environmental stressor, right? I mentioned earlier about how environmental stresses change how you train, they change the context. How do you feel safe when you're training? It's like all of those things are really, really relevant. So personally, for myself, as a fighter, as a warrior, as a martial artist, I'm constantly evaluating how I fit within the framework of what's around me. That comes from a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error. And I'm sharing it because ultimately there really is no 100% safe training environment, and everything we do is doing that to some degree, if that makes sense. My example is a little more extreme, but every environment is going to have some measure of danger in it. And we try and reduce that when we're training. We try and reduce that through language. We try and reduce that through the protective gear that we're using, the experience and the drilling, and our own sense of physical self and our own understanding of parameters and everything. But we are going to get hurt. It comes with the territory of training. So I'm not advocating getting hurt, but I'm also going to say that understanding how to bounce back after you have been injured emotionally and physically in a training environment, again, it's like a bad sexual experience. Like, how do you get back out there after you've had a couple? how do you have a meaningful connection with another person that makes you feel safe and good about everything, and more than that, have fun. It's really just, you've got to do it. You've got to put yourself in a position where you are allowing yourself to be vulnerable, but not in such a way that you're going to get repeatedly abused. Like me training with that guy who hit me so hard, so I did it once, bad experience. If I'd have gone back, that's really perpetuating something bad. So it's a process of evaluation. I know that I'm overly self-reflective and introspective. I don't expect that of everyone. And that's just really like.
Hey, come on, grab a knife and stab someone.
I'm ready. Yes.
This is the moment you were waiting for.
You only get one. We're still trying to keep this Marazzo. Marazzo only had stuff for bare hands against one knife. That is the context we're doing right now.
Oh. I really want to be over there. What are we talking about? We're done.
Yeah,
No, but
that
seriously,
all of a sudden, there's a lot less of a safety margin on
Yeah.
that. But like, a lot worse.
Yeah.
Are you going to destroy your pocket knife instead of now? I saw you were like, I have a knife, this is way better.
Okay, this is a great example. Thanks, Gaia. This is a great example. So we've got two people
Yeah,
in mismatched heights.
you might
Yeah?
have different follow-up.
I'm talking about, is it the human with the beard and the human in the black shirt?
Raven
Okay, so I happen to know that his movement style gets rigid and explosive.
Exactly.
He will do a burst of movement and then freeze, a burst of movement and then freeze. They appear to be a little bit more fluid, which means there's going to be a calibration problem with their movement when they're drilling, because he's going to work like the beats. If for some reason one of those movements happens at a time that's not good for them, how do you communicate that? Because it's just another person's way of moving, you know? These are problem questions. These are not like I have the solutions and I'm going to give you. These are just observational things. So if I were coordinating people as an instructor, I would look for people who moved in a similar way for a training exercise. Or I would, if I were in the middle of it, find someone that moved a bit more like me, or is more physically like me, for a drill. That again is about experience. That's about knowing how to work with different environmental factors and rearrange them to like it.
That's actually.
That looks like a real great idea.
That seems like a win.
That's yeah, because there's that nice lateral motion, and you're just like, yeah, please, I'm gonna take this.
I'm sorry, I'm getting so distracted.
Another question, you talked a lot kind of about the distinction between a more formalized training environment, like a structured class setting, and a more unstructured training environment that, you know, like we have a community sparring every Saturday that we just come out to muck about as we see fit. Is force calibration like been a thing you do in an unstructured environment? At the beginning of whatever playtime you're going to have with these people, explicitly calibrate how fast and how hard you plan to play.
Great question. Personally, in my experience, I would
Trade
wait
knives
for
with
time.
another pair.
And what I'll end up doing, I'll firstly do a physical assessment of someone from a distance, and I'll watch how they move, and I'll watch how they respond to other people. If they're posturing, if they're speaking loudly, if they're making big movements, I'm not going to, because I'm assessing the fact that they are making those in a social situation already without even adding in a weapon. So in my mind, I'm making a judgment of them. I might be completely wrong. They might change when they put a weapon in their hands. But that's my first calibration, is to assess the person that I then plan to pair with. Kind of like you're in the bar, you're like checking out that that's what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for those signs that person might be suitable to match with me personally. What I will look for is observation in other people. I will look for quietness. I will look for smoothness of movement, because if they have those three qualities, it doesn't matter what their actual skill is. It means that they are moving in a way that can be adjusted. So that's my first calibration, is before we even talk to each other, I will assess what kind of mover they are, and if that works for me. I have had more satisfying experiences with people who are not experienced martial artists than I have with martial artists because of the approach that they bring to their fighting. It doesn't matter if the person who I'm partnering with is good at necessarily moving a sword. What I mean by good is just experience. It doesn't matter if they're good at, if they're experienced at necessarily pulling off techniques or striking me or whatever. If they come at it from the right approach and the right listening to me kind of feeling, I would have a better and more satisfying training time with them than if I was to go with someone who was experienced. So that's the very first thing that I do for calibration is I observe. After I've taken the person into a cozy little ring, I will usually do a few passes with them and to get an idea, okay, is this person what I thought they were? If they're hitting me too hard. And again, the situation that I told you with that workshop, that was an unusual thing. But usually what I do after a few passes is I will communicate with the person and be like, hey, is that good for you? Happy with that? Do you want to go a little faster? Do you want to go a little slower? And we will usually non-verbally figure it out. Again, because I've done that initial assessment of the person before I even start with them, I've assessed that they're someone who is quieter and doesn't want to talk through it, because that works for me in a fighting situation. If I'm talking with somebody, I'm not thinking about them. And that's my own brain wiring. I know some people need to talk to understand things and they need to process things verbally. It's just that for me, partnering with someone that doesn't work. So I will look for those people who are quiet and will be able to communicate with our bodies what we're doing. I don't know how to recommend that for other people who have different ways of communicating and processing, but hopefully you can take something from that that could be adaptable. I think it might be useful to have some kind of scale. If I were going to kind of create a plan or something that could be followed by people, I would say like, create an intensity scale, kind of like a little bit like volume with music, like you get an idea of what's kind of the average listening level for a room. Is it party level? Is it someone's talking so we don't want it too loud? That kind of thing.
When we do boxing sparring specifically, we always give half speed, 3/4 speed, full speed, and light, medium, or hard. How we're ending that day.
Okay, cool. My only concern with that would be is if it was someone whose hard was not the same as hard. Like it's like how long is a piece of string?
We also tend to do a calibration punch beforehand.
We do,
Yeah.
yes. We explicitly give calibration on it. Hey, that's how hard we're going. You're good with that? Oh, a little harder, a little softer?
Yeah, okay.
We hit each other once before we actually begin any rounds.
Cool. That reminds me of something that I didn't touch on, which is when you say that you're okay when you're not. Like, I did say it before when I said, what's okay. But it's like, you're going to a new school, this is the norm for everyone says this is fine, and you're like, actually this isn't fine for me, but I want to be fine for this situation, I want to be okay for this situation, so I'm going to man up and
It makes it a parallel to that kind of thing where not all consent is actual consent. If
Yes.
there's power imbalances in the situation, if there's so much to lose socially, you're going to want to say okay, otherwise you feel illegal.
completely.
But is that
You're gonna
actually
lose
consent
space in that
if
situation.
there's so much to lose by
Yeah,
just
so
having
either-
that boundary?
Exactly. And it takes a lot of self okayness to be able to say that you don't want to be in that situation when you're in that kind of, even if it's like really passive and friendly social pressure, like, hey, there's this thing that you could do if you want, like, we would love you to be here, you don't have to, genuinely you don't have to, and you're like, oh, I really want to, but I don't feel good, but I really want it, and then you're like, and that just comes down to being an adult and being able to know yourself enough to be able to communicate what really is okay. And I mean that's no one is going to get that right all the time. That's always going to be a thing that we have to work on really, because that's just a getting to know yourself thing, and being honest with yourself and other people around you. So but you nailed it when you said not all consent is actual consent. Coming right back to the bedroom, that is a thing that happens. And then after the experience, you're like, oh God, I feel awful because I went through with something that I don't feel good about. And I said it was okay, and it's not okay, but it's not their fault. It's, yeah. My hope with this talk is this is going to create good conversations for the community in general that are going to lead to more clarity and more safety for everyone, like not just safety equipment, but safety and emotional safety. And people who are good martial artists, who aren't necessarily experienced, but could be if they stuck with it, and had the ability to negotiate what was good going forward.
I think that happens a lot in like tournament fighting, where you'll something will happen. You're like, "Are you okay?" You're like, "Yeah, I'm okay." You're really
You're
not.
super adrenalized.
Like you know, you don't want to back out of it, but you're like that guy.
You don't wanna get into those feelings right now, you just wanna get
Yeah,
through
like
the
that
rest of the
sucked
day.
and this is not okay, but I need to keep going anyways. And then you're like,
Because it's a
that
scene
was terrible.
otherwise.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't want to make a scene.
yeah.
I think the context piece of environment matters a lot in that.
Yeah.
Training in Valkyrie, there's a lot of like structural support for explicitly navigating the partnership aspects of fighting. That I haven't had experiences in any other martial arts schools, but what I've heard from other people is that that piece is a lot less clearly communicated. We have a lot of neurotypical people who may not be able to read those cues or may need extra time or just different ways of interacting that
Excellent
might
point.
look a little bit different,
Excellent.
read as wrong or different, and when you don't know them, gauging that situation can be trickier, and I think the structural supports in place at different places that you're training are always gonna be
The other thing,
different. You can't like assume that what is natural for one environment works in another.
And that's what comes back to when Alex was like communication. It's like, well, what is communication? You know, what's normal for somebody is normal for someone else in communication. Two questions.
oh, just to build on like unique components of the Valkyrie culture is even when something goes wrong, we actually have structural supports for when the systems that we do have that we rely on, they don't always work 100%, and
People
like
still get hurt.
people still get hurt, and all of us have found the ability to trust that even if something does go wrong, something within the way that we communicate with each other means that we can go back and be like, oh, what happened? And that's not gonna, there's gonna be no negative consequence to having that conversation.
Telling someone, hey, that was not cool.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So that's part of building the culture as much as building the individuals. Yeah.
One of the, given the parallel you're drawing, is the ability to withdraw consent.
Oh, right, yeah.
If you're doing something and maybe you don't, in my example, I've had panic attacks in the middle of a class. Hadn't realized they were happening until they were happening. And so being able to say no and just be out of there.
Yeah. That's an excellent point.
Hey, you found one!
We've been talking about communication and consent in the context of training in martial arts, and I keep thinking about it in terms of the movie Pacific Rim,
Okay.
because there's that.
This is going fun places.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole idea of drift compatibility and this person who, I guess, you have a close enough style of communication initially that you're able to work together without really needing to vocalize things. And it's the idea when you're training with someone, it's not a competition, it's a dialogue. The whole thing, everything you're doing, things you say, the way you move, whether you have a weapon or not, it's all a way of communicating. And if you're really in tune to each other, like, I mean, I come back to that story of you sparring with the guy who hits really hard, and that, like, I just feel like you should have known that was not okay, because I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah, but you're touching on something that I also noticed, because even though I'm very new to the kind of martial arts scene, but since you've already made the comparison with Saex, for example, you've also touched on stuff like that. I'm like I have a lot of experience, or like I spend a lot of time in the kind of tabletop role-playing community, and there's basically everything that you said is applicable to that scene and that space as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, apart from like the actual kind of, you're not as physical, obviously, but you're very emotionally vulnerable in that space. And stuff like compatibility is an important thing there. Stuff like communicating about boundaries, obviously. having bad experiences.
I
And
get
you
a
know
real flinch and I actually have to.
the person who hits too hard in your story would be for someone else like another player or whatever who who steps over a different line. And yeah, that's kind of that's just an indicator of this isn't necessarily
Switch knives.
just exclusive to one thing, but it's like an underlying communication.
It's about what you want out of an experience, right? Whether it's tabletop role playing
I
or like a
got
right?
there, but
If-
man, did that.
If you both want similar things and hear
and what
the
I
compromises
want
you're
you
willing
to
to make
do
and hear the
is
compromises you're not willing to make, and being able to have that discussion is really useful.
And withdrawing consent, as you
Under a
said,
little
and that
bit
being
of
an
pressure,
okay
under a
thing.
little bit of
And
stress.
people are not going to think less of you necessarily. Even if it happens again and again, you're that person who has to step out every 10 minutes. Like,
Reminder.
whatever. Like, if
if
you
you
are
hear
in a
the words
good training
red, red,
environment,
red,
a culture that's okay with that,
Stop everything.
then that is okay.
If you want
That's
everything
part
to
of
stop,
it.
say the
That's
words
part of
really
what makes that space good for you, makes that environment good for you. Is not having to pretend to be someone that you're not, just so that you can do the thing that you love. And one of the difficulties is that there are a lot of spaces where people have to train because there are so few people doing swordsmanship. And we're so lucky to have what we have now. I started this 10 years ago and there was a lot more going on. So I mean, I remember what it was like to be kind of really limited in your options. And to kind of touch on what we were talking about earlier in a totally different conversation, you don't know what's not good for you community-wise. You remember at lunch we were talking about like you're in the middle of something and you don't know it's not good until after you leave it. And we were talking about that in a queer context of support for queer people and being in communities that are actually kind of toxic, and you don't know until you leave that that's actually the reality of the situation. So there's definitely a lot of parallels. I wish that everyone could recognize what's good for themselves and be able to stand up for it regardless of the consequences. But it's not easy. It's not easy. And there's always consequences. It's just you've got to decide. This circles back to being a martial artist. You've got to decide what kind of a journey you want. You've got to decide what kind of values you want to build into yourself. What are the values that you want to develop on others? Because there are always going to be different opportunities. Maybe it is okay to train with the high hitters if you are going there for that purpose. You know, you make it work for you, make that situation work for you. It's kind of like the power imbalance. Like if you're going into that situation hoping it'll give you something else, and then it doesn't, it makes you feel bad. But if you are going into it knowingly and being like, okay, well today's hard punching day, so I'm going to go train with the guys who are hitting the bag super hard. I'm not going to let them punch me, but I'm going to make that opportunity work for me and learn from those guys how to frickin' do that kind of punch, because damn.
Like, Dave would be really
You know what I'm
proud
saying?
of
It's
this
like,
one right now.
recognize how you can make something work for you.
Yes!
And
Thank
recognize
you.
that you're also more important. Your journey is more important. Because it's personal, it's intimate to you, it's really about your own engagement with the world for the rest of your lives. And I say that as a learning journey.
Alright, one more attempt each.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure.
Sorry, I felt.
That's about okay. I know
You're
that.
on the couch.
But I think that was a great point though. It's like, even though like you can give consent, but it's important to
That's not
to recognize
forever.
It's
your
not
partner
consent
your
unless
partner
you
can
take
change their
withdrawal.
mind. Like, all right, no, it's no longer okay for me to do
Yeah.
Yeah.
it. I no longer like you.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I had someone I really loved training with because unfortunately I was comfortable with, and his competitiveness in this particular attitude he had for the training was not great, and I didn't train with him for a long time, then I trained with him for a bit and ended up having a bad experience, and then but then I don't train with him currently.
I had the same thing.
Right, so you get the twist.
Obviously, won't name names, but somebody who started coming to us, that we've both identified, and we both had issues with.
We're probably all talking
Probably
about
all
the
talking
same
about the same
person.
person.
About it.
Strange how you're all talking from the same person.
Yeah, probably. But I had the same thing where I have a lot of Pascala, which makes it difficult for me to believe that what I'm doing is legitimate. So if I feel uncomfortable, if I feel in distress, I go, oh, well, that's probably just me being too sensitive, and nothing's probably wrong, I'm just overblowing the situation.
That second guessing of your own reactions?
Yes, my bodily experiences, my emotions are not appropriate to the situation, is that kind of thing. And then realizing that it doesn't actually matter if I'm
You can
having...
still treat those as valid.
Exactly. So I think I had that point where I was pushing myself to still spar with this person, and I felt very, very uncomfortable. And then I eventually realized like something bad would happen if I continued to be in that space because I was just checked out. So being able to pull back and be like, hey, like I'm actually just completely spacing out, I'm not present. That I know is unsafe for me and it's unsafe for this other person. And you know, one, I just don't spar with that person, but two, I would not have been able to do that if this wasn't a space that allowed that, because more than just the person that you're sparring with, I think it's the community around it as well, of not just consent of like, oh, you don't consent to sparring with this person, that's fine, but to have no pressure to be like, well, where are you going? Why are you leaving the group? Like, you're not, you know, being a good, I don't know, student or like team player, or like, there's no shame for just taking a step back, and I owe that completely to the community. So it's hard to like, there's you and the other person, but oftentimes it's the vibe and the community around that. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's totally no problem. It's just good to remind ourselves.
We were kind of comparing this to relationships a bit throughout, and I think there's really another way to kind of come at that. But I was in a really abusive relationship for a number of years where I gaslighted a lot, and it got to the point where I internalized that a lot, and it's something I'm still kind of unpacking and figuring out. But that has definitely led to instances of like doubting myself. If I think I've hit my limit, and it's like, but have I really? Am I just whining?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, your body knows when you need to stop. Like that little voice that you're not listening to would not be making that noise if it didn't have a good reason.
Can I speak to that for a sec?
Yeah.
It's absolutely okay to stop if you're just whining.
Yeah.
You don't have to be 100% all the time. We're here for fun. This should serve us. You know?
That's a really
You can still grow in those situations too. Like, there are opportunities for growth without pushing yourself through every bad area.
Precisely. Just like, I feel you.
Yeah, there's always a bit like, but could I go for longer? Yeah, but why? Do I want to?
Make it work.
There's a why. Sometimes,
Yeah.
like often,
Yeah, but not
if the why
necessarily.
is
Yeah.
yours or
Yeah.
valuable to you, then it's like an expectation of being shamed or applying an external value that means that you're less than if you don't push yourself beyond. Like, no, it should be your why.
Completely. And that's what I meant about making it serve you. Like, make the opportunity to serve you, because that's ultimately what you do. It's your journey.
There's one.
I think I'm gonna close the portal to the
Oh, right. Yeah. Nice.
Oh, yay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your vulnerability as well. It's really hard to talk about stuff that's like it's hard to talk about stuff that's shitty that's happened to us. It's harder to talk about stuff that we feel has been shifted. And I think there's a massive vulnerability to be able to talk about that as just human beings.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I was like, thank you for that. That's, and I also want to like honor that that's a big deal. So thank you.
Hello.
Have a think about who you want the painting to go to, because after the last session we'll go straight into that discussion so we can do it while people are getting changed and talking.
Okay.
Oh, excellent.
Nobody likes the hot
Hello, everybody. The lecture is now over, if you weren't paying attention. I have recorded these videos. They should be available on YouTube as well. So I'm sorry if you couldn't hear what was being said. We did have a microphone. It didn't. We had a small tech problem at the beginning of the day, and all of us were too busy rolling around with swords and things to fix it. So apologies about the lack of audio on this. But yeah, I will have those videos available later. Just if you missed the context, I am at a big gay sword day with Valkyrie Western Martial Arts Assembly here in Vancouver. It was an absolutely excellent space. These folks have been creating a very inclusive training space that specializes in Western martial arts, but also self-defense, and they're both creating adaptable fighters, but also people who feel safe and vulnerable enough to be themselves in the space. So there's a lot of queer people, there's a lot of trans people, people who are neuroatypical who come here, and there's also like totally mainstream people as well. It's a really wonderful space. So yeah, I was brought over here to do the talk that you've just heard, as well as teaching sword and buckle. Yes, I'm gonna go do sword things now. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you guys on the internet.